Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 4 of our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone. 26 unforgettable explorations into the realm of the supernatural, and it is adapted by Walter B. Gibson. And we're going to go over the copyright information here. It's going to take me a while to find it. Here we go. It clearly says Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone is copyright 1963 by Cayuga Publications Incorporated, and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited is copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, all rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company Incorporated, a Random House company, and it gives the address there. This book was previously published as 2 separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited. Printed and bound in the United States, and it gives the Library of Congress information if you're interested in all that. Anyways, we started in the last episode or part, we started reading Back There. It is really interesting, and we met Mr. Corrigan. And he got drenched by a cloudburst, and so he had to change clothes, and he's wearing this old-timey outfit. Anyways, and he just became a member of the Potomac Club. Potomac? The Potomac Club. So, anyways, we are going to continue this. There are several scientists arguing and philosophy and stuff, so we're going to continue. Okay. Come, let me show you around the club as a new member, while I express some of my own opinions. They stopped first at the fireplace, where the low crackle of burning logs and the wavering gray smoke seemed to blend with the elderly historian's reminiscent tone. That portrait of our founder, Bushrod Chichester, was placed here the day the club opened in 1858, Dr. Jackson began. So were these other paintings, as he indicated 2 framed canvases on opposite walls, each representing a sylvan scene from ancient Greece, and this crystal chandelier. Jackson pointed towards the ceiling fixture, which glittered in the reflection of electric bulbs that had replaced the old-time gas jets. They came from Pendleton's gambling establishment on Pennsylvania Avenue, explained Jackson. He died the year this club was founded. Many of the tables and chairs were bought at auction from Pendleton's Palace of Fortune. I often fancy that I can hear the clicks of the roulette wheel or the call of the faro dealers. Faro? I think so. Corrigan almost heard them himself, only to identify the click as the snap of a burning log and the calls as the voice of Millard and Whitaker. Next, Jackson took Corrigan, into the lounge, where the elderly historian pointed out antiques from old Washington residences, exquisite objects of Oriental art, that Commodore Perry had brought back from Japan, and souvenirs President Buchanan had collected just before the Civil War, as Dr. Jackson summed it. Everything in the Potomac Club is exactly as it was a century or more ago. It grips you with the spirit, and sometimes when I leave, I feel about to step out into the past. That is why I go along, to some extent, with Millard's theory. I should go along with it too, Corrigan chuckled, glancing down at his attire, considering I am dressed for the part. As they reached the foyer, Dr. Jackson indicated the portrait gallery. These men were all founders, he declared. See how their eyes grip you with the spirit of their time. Those eyes viewed stirring scenes of the Civil War. They were eyes that saw Lincoln. Some even witnessed his assassination. They draw you back, wanting to tell you more. If we could only meet those men and ask them. Excuse me, sir, imposed Corrigan. There goes William. I must ask him if my suit is ready. Do that, Dr. Jackson nodded. I will be back with the others. William was near the marble steps when Corrigan overtook him. The tiled floor of the foyer was damp, but Corrigan didn't notice it. That mental slip resulted in a physical slip as well. Corrigan's feet shot out from under him, carrying him down the steps. He caught at the wooden railing, twisting himself half about, and luckily broke his fall, but it wasn't enough to avoid a stunning thump as the back of his head hit the post at the bottom of the stairs. Corrigan caught a fleeting glimpse of William's wrinkled face looking down at him in horror. That sight was obliterated by a galaxy of shooting stars, and that immediately blacked out. Then gradually Corrigan came back to consciousness once more and opened his eyes to see William again. "You had a bad spill, sir," said William as Corrigan rubbed the back of his head. "I couldn't catch you. How do you feel now?" Corrigan wasn't entirely sure. For one thing, William looked younger at this close range. His face was smooth, his uniform and its gold braids were brighter. He was stronger too, for with his left arm he brought Corrigan to his feet and steadied him there. "I guess I'm all right," decided Corrigan, as he tried to review past events. "I wonder, is it still raining?" "Raining?" repeated William. "No, sir, it isn't raining." "It's probably stopped by now," agreed Corrigan. "I think I'll take a little walk. Some fresh air will help me." Corrigan went slowly down the steps, guided by William's supporting arm. The attendant moved ahead to open the door, inward, with his left hand, half obstructing his figure as he did. Corrigan nodded a thank you and stepped out into the sultry April afternoon. William was right. The rain had stopped. An open carriage was standing at the curb from the box. A uniformed coachman tipped his high hat. Still feeling unsteady, Corrigan decided to ride instead of walk. He climbed into the rear seat and settled back. So you have these hacks in Washington now, just like Central Park," he remarked. "Central Park?" queried the coachman. "Where is that?" "In New York." "Oh," the driver nodded. Whatever you have in New York, we have here in Washington. Everything except subways." "Subways?" puzzled the coachman. Shook his head, then queried, "Where would you like to go, sir?" "To Willard's?" The name struck a familiar note with Corrigan. "Yes, make it Willard's." The coachman checked on his horse and leaned back as the carriage started. In a confidential tone, he stated, "You know how bad these side streets are, sir. Wouldn't it be better if I took the avenue, even though it's a little longer?" "The avenue will be all right." Eyes half closed, Corrigan thought back, wondering if all this was part of his initiation as a new member of the Potomac Club. Perhaps William had been instructed to give him the old-fashioned costume. "That talk about time travel," Jackson remarked on the ancient atmosphere of the club rooms. This unique carriage waiting out front all seemed too pat. Corrigan decided to draw out the coachman. "Tell me," asked Corrigan, "when did the rain stop?" "The rain? We haven't had any today, sir. It's been muggy, as you can see." The coachman flicked his whip toward the dull, leaden sky. "But nary a drop of rain." Corrigan looked at the narrow red brick sidewalk and saw that it was entirely dry. So, for that matter, was the unpaved street along which they bumped. To his amazement, Corrigan saw some pigs crossing in front of the carriage, grunting moodily because they could find no mud in which to wallow. Even more surprising, the coachman pulled up the horse to let a flock of honking geese waddle in search of water. "You see how dry it is," observed the coachman. "We had a little rain earlier in the week, but it didn't last. And when did the cherry blossoms come out in the spring?" "Oh, when did the cherry blossoms come out in the spring?" "Cherry blossoms," the coachman was really puzzled. "I never heard of them blooming here in Washington." Then Corrigan thought was carrying it too far, though he had been almost ready to believe he had really stepped into the past when he left the Potomac Club. Then, as the carriage swung into Pennsylvania Avenue, he was suddenly and totally convinced. This was unquestionably Washington, but completely different from the city as Corrigan had last seen it. The Capitol building loomed a few blocks to the southeast, but its dome was very new and glittery, with the immediate surroundings were while the immediate surroundings were strangely barren of other buildings. Yet here, where Pennsylvania Avenue should have been practically an open park, there were rows of buildings on both sides, with carriages and wagons hitched in front of them. Not an automobile, nor even a trolley car was in sight, only horse-drawn vehicles, like a scene from an old photograph. As Corrigan's carriage turned into traffic and rattled the cobbles, along the cobbles away from the Capitol, Corrigan studied the building fronts. He saw a tall striped barber pole, some red and white, other more patriotic in red, white, and blue. A huge wooden watch face hung above a jewelry store. An even larger wooden musket represented a gunsmith, while life-sized wooden Indians peered from the doorways of tobacco shops. On opposite corners, at the right, stood two large but squatty hotels. One bore the sign The National, and the other The Metropolitan. Was smaller but impressive because of its marble front, but when the carriage had jogged a few blocks further, Corrigan was shocked by the constant on the left. There, a dilapidated row of buildings gave way to a conglomeration of clumsy wooden sheds flanked by tumble-down shacks with hog pens in the offing. The Central Market, the coachman said, a busy spot all during the war. We call it the Marsh Market because of the marsh around it. The man evidently referred to the marshy ground that ran clear back to a muddy ditch that looked like an old canal. Then the scene changed for the better. Set back from the avenue, at a neatly landscaped area, stood a group of reddish stone buildings with odd-shaped towers that Corrigan recognized as the Smithsonian Institution, which he had often visited while engaged in his scientific research. But it was different from the Smithsonian that Corrigan remembered. Not from the past, but from the future. Different, too, was the scene straight up the avenue where Corrigan saw a bulky structure of red brick. Puzzled, he asked, "Isn't that where the White House should be?" "It's there," the coachman assured him, "but it's around the corner of the Treasury building. You're looking at the red barn, that old buck built on the grounds while he was still president." Corrigan's gaze drifted to the left. His eyes narrowed as he viewed a square-shaped ruin and stood more than 100 feet high. "And what is that?" "An old abandoned chimney stack? Why, that's the Washington Monument, sir," the coachman proclaimed proudly. They've been 15 years and more getting it that high, so it should take them that much longer. It should take them that much longer to finish it. Now Corrigan's mind was in focus. The incredible had happened, but it was beginning to make sense. This must be Washington during the last days of the Civil War, for as Corrigan studied the passers-by, he saw many soldiers in bright blue uniforms, but among them others in ragged, faded gray. Those were Confederates who had either deserted their cause or had surrendered and had been given their parole. That was why they were so friendly with the blue-clad Union troops. Corrigan was beginning to enjoy his ride when the carriage wheeled in front of another large, rambling hotel, and the coachman announced, "Here we are at Willard's, sir." For the first time, Corrigan thought of money. He thrust his hand into the pocket of his borrowed coat and, to his surprise, brought out a wad of paper currency. He found an odd-looking bill that at least bore the familiar figure 5, so he peeled it off and handed it to the coachman. More confident now, Corrigan stalked into what he thought would be the familiar surroundings of the Willard Hotel, which he knew as well as the Smithsonian Institute or the Capitol itself. Only he didn't know this Willard Hotel, the famous old um, hostelry of the Civil War period, was an absolute contrast to its modern counterpart of a century later. The thickly carpeted lobbies, spread out everywhere, terminated at one end in a vast dining room already thronged with patrons who were ordering huge dinners. Though it was scarcely more than late afternoon, gentlemen in clothes like Corrigan's, he looked to make sure he was still wearing them, were bowling to hoop-skirted ladies as they descended the sweeping staircase. High-ranking Union officers were strolling by in stately style, and Corrigan stepped aside to watch the grand parade. Corrigan's elbow nudged a stack of thin newspapers that were resting on a newsstand. He saw the title Washington Evening Star and purchased it with some large copper coins that he found in his pocket, about to scan the headlines. Corrigan paused first to note the paper's date. Friday, April 14th, 1865. Corrigan stood stunned. The day was destined to be the saddest in the annuals of America. For on the evening of this fateful Friday, the assassination of President Lincoln was to shock the nation of the world. Shock the nation and the world. If ever there was a chance to change the course of history, that chance was Corrigan's right. That was Corrigan's right now. Frantically, Corrigan thumbed through the Star to find the theatrical news. He came across the announcement that President and Mrs. Lincoln and General Grant had taken a box at Ford's Theater to witness the final appearance of Miss Laura Keene in Our American Cousin that night. That was enough for Corrigan. He started out into the gathering dusk with just one thought: to get to the theater and do all he could to prevent the coming crime. A hack was standing handy, and Corrigan told the driver to take him to Ford's Theater at once. There was no need to give the address, 10th Street, between E and F. The hack driver knew it. Arriving at the theater, Corrigan sprang across the planking that bridged the deep gutter between street and sidewalk. He rushed into the lobby and found the box office closed. After he had rapped repeatedly on the shuttered window, the blind finally slid up, and a dull-faced youth peered through the grating. "Take your time," the youth said. "We're just opening up, and the rush hasn't even started. What price seat do you want?" "I want to see the manager. He won't be here until after dinner. All I can do is sell you a ticket. They run 25, 50, and 75 cents. In his pocket, Corrigan found some paper scrip, small functional currency of less than $1, which was used extensively during the Civil War. He made up the right amount and pushed it through the window. "Here is 75 cents. Corrigan received his ticket and thrust it into the breast pocket of his coat. Then sharply, he insisted, "I still want to see the manager." "Maybe you'll find him in the refreshment bar next door," the young man suggested. "If not, go around backstage and ask for Mr. Ford." In the establishment next door, Corrigan asked for Mr. Ford to meet with the return query. "Which Mr. Ford?" When Corrigan retorted, "Any Mr. Ford." He was told that no Fords were about. A few patrons of the place showed undue interest in Corrigan's inquiry, so rather than become involved with them, he left abruptly. Around the block, he found a dingy alley and walked through it past a stable, where a brownish horse lifted its nose and whinnied a greeting. At the stage door, Corrigan pounded empathetically until a stocky man in overalls appeared and demanded to know what he wanted. "I want to see Mr. Ford, the manager." "About what?" "About the president coming here to the theater tonight. He is in danger. Someone wants to kill him, and he must be warned." "You won't find the manager around here. Suppose I see for myself." As Corrigan pushed by, the stocky man made a hard, wide swing with his fist. Expecting it, Corrigan parried and countered with a short, telling jab, staggering the stocky man Staggered, the stalking man howled for help, and immediately 3 other men came running in response. While Corrigan tangled with them, the stalking man deserted his pals and ran for the alley. He returned with 2 men in blue frock coats and round straw hats, who grabbed Corrigan from each side, clamped handcuffs on him, and dragged him to a waiting wagon. There, Corrigan learned that he was in the coils of the Metropolitan Police. All the way to their headquarters, Corrigan kept berating them. "Let me go, you fools! Don't you know that the president is in danger?" "That's what I was trying to tell them at the theater." Then tell it to the sergeant, one of the officers retorted. "He'll listen." The sergeant did listen. "Well, you idiots are holding me," argued Corrigan, as he faced the desk at headquarters. "President Lincoln will be shot tonight during the performance by a man named Booth." Isn't there a play actor named Wilkes Booth?" quizzed the sergeant. "That's the one," rejoined Corrigan. "John Wilkes Booth." The sergeant picked up a playbill that was lying on the desk and smiled indulgently. "Ford Theater was handing these out today," he said, "but there's nothing here about Booth. He isn't even in the show." "But he'll be hanging around the theater awaiting his chance," Corrigan insisted. The sergeant turned to 2 patrolmen. "Did you see anyone hanging around Ford Theater?" "Only this fellow," one patrolman indicated Corrigan. "We were called in to get rid of him by a stagehand named Ned Spangler." "Spangler." The name rang a bell to Corrigan. "He's one of them." One of whom?" demanded the sergeant. "The plotters who are out to kill the president." The sergeant gestured to the cell room and ordered, "Put this man away. He's either drunk or crazy." Behind the bars, Corrigan waxed even more indignantly, shouting loud enough for the sergeant to hear him. "Drunk or crazy, you say? You'll find out differently. I tell you, I know that tonight Wilkes Booth plans to assassinate President Lincoln. Don't ask me why or how I know. I just know, and I intend to prevent it, even if I have to break down these bars." From the desk, the sergeant glowered in the direction of Corrigan's cell, then glanced about at his men. He demanded, "One of you find a way to calm that fool down." A young patrolman responded, "I know a way, Sergeant." "And what would that be, Frescott?" "You listen to him. Maybe he's talking sense." "Have you gone daft too, Frescott?" "Hardly, Sergeant. I just know that he sounds positive about what he says. A man who talks that way must know something." Corrigan quieted as he heard this, and thus adding weight to Frescott's words, but the sergeant was still unconvinced. "What would you have me do?" he demanded. "Send all the reserve patrolmen to Ford Theater on the word of some demented fool?" "It wouldn't hurt," rejoined Patrolman Frescott, "to put a guard on the president's box. But the president already has a guard, a regular man assigned from this department. If he wants more, he can call for them. Who are we to tell the president what to do? Besides, he has the whole army at his disposal if he needs it. Don't forget, General Grant will be at the theater with him." The sergeant let the words sink in, then added, "I'm telling you, Frescott, unless you use more judgment in sizing up these situations, you won't go far in this department." That may have settled it, but for Corrigan, who renewed the clatter from the cell door, hoping to stir Frescott to further action. A frown up on his roundish face, Frescott began a new protest, only to be interrupted by a well-dressed man who strode into the patrol room, glancing towards Corrigan's cell and turned to the desk. "Sergeant," the newcomer asked, "is that the man who created the disturbance at Ford's?" "Yes. He says his name is Corrigan." "What about him?" "I want you to release him to my custody." "Oh, I want you to release him in my custody." "And who might you be?" The visitor drew a calling card from his pocket and handed it to the sergeant, who read slowly, "Bartram J. Wellington, M.D. So you're a doctor, a specialist in mental ailments. The government has assigned me to cases like this. We picked up dozens of persons who have been talking about assassinations and other plots. It has reached the proportions of an epidemic." "That wouldn't surprise me. what do you do with these cases? We examine them to find the cause of their dementia. If we can, sympathetic treatment, proper rest, a full consideration of their stories will often bring about a cure. There's nothing criminal in their actions. There is when they assault someone, Dr. Wellington, like the way this Corrigan was pitching into Spangler. Spangler? Who is he, Sergeant? Ned Spangler, stagehand at the Fords. The sergeant explained. He was the one who made the complaint. I'm told that they all pitched into Corrigan. That's why the case was reported to our department. Wellington strode over to Corrigan's cell and studied him with a friendly smile. Then, swinging about, he added, I think I can handle him, Sergeant, if he's willing to come with me. How about it, Corrigan? From his cell, Corrigan agreed. I'm willing. As a turnkey was unlocking Corrigan's cell, a patrolman arrived and handed a note to the sergeant. Corrigan approached the desk and said, Let me tell you one thing, Sergeant. The president is in more danger than you suppose. General Grant will not be there with him tonight. The sergeant gave Corrigan a quick, sharp stare. What makes you say that? I happen to know. Well, that is, I just guessed. And you guessed right, the message says that George Grant is leaving by train for Philadelphia and won't be at the theater tonight. Real suspicion was gleaming in the sergeant's eyes now, which was exactly the opposite of what Corrigan wanted. It would be better to go along with Dr. Wellington, an intelligent man who seemed ready to listen. It was Wellington himself who swayed the balance, a sympathetic smile upon his broad, handsome face. He remarked quietly, You can see how quickly a man in this condition grasps for every straw. Believe me, Sergeant, it is the business of our medical department to find out where such people come from and how they learn the things they do. We always manage to sift the facts. I'll have Corrigan's story soon enough. We have been reading from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to join the Discord server or if you want to support me in any way, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.